At some point, some of you have had to have asked yourselves, which Minecraft update is better? 1.8, the Bountiful update, or 1.9, the Combat update? And most of you will probably say 1.8 because of some controversial changes in 1.9. Well, let me explain better. I'm not here to solely talk about the combat differences. Instead, I'm going to be breaking down both updates in full depth, going through every new feature and change, and seeing which update does a better job overall. I'll be discussing this through 5 categories. These include world generation, mobs, blocks, gameplay mechanics, and overall experience. Whichever update gets the most points is the winner. This is the part where I tell you to like and subscribe, but I'm not going to, even though I just did. I'll say this, watch the video until the end, and then make your decision. That being said, let's begin with the first category, world generation. Both these updates have a decent amount of new things to explore. In regards to terrain, 1.8 adds 3 new stone types that generate underground. These include granite, andesite, and my personal favorite, diorite. These give you a wider variety of stone types to discover while you're mining. Unfortunately, in this update at least, they don't offer very much. They have cool ways of being used, but we'll talk more about that later. 1.9 on the other hand completely overhauls the generation of the end dimension. Starting off, the formation of the end island is different. The giant pillars now spawn in a circle around the center of the island, and the exit portal is now visible throughout the whole fight. But that's not even scratching the surface. This update adds the outer islands to the end, which basically make the end an infinite dimension just like the overworld in the Nether. The outer islands are like the main island, giant blobs of endstone and the godforsaken endermen. But unlike the main island, they generate with fields of coarse fruit, which is a new food source exclusive to the end. I'll talk more about this later, but this at least gives you a means to survive in the endless void that is, well, the end. But if you think that's all, both updates add new structures as well. 1.8 adds the Ocean Monument, the first underwater structure added to the game. Because of this, you'll have to prepare yourself with a decent number of water-breathing potions, and maybe also night vision potions if you can't see. Or you could just place down a bunch of doors because to this day they still aren't waterlogged. The structure itself is pretty large and is quite a maze to explore. It's inhabited by one-eyed fish called guardians that shoot freaking lasers from their eyes. There are also 3 much stronger guardians known as Elder Guardians, which can grant you an effect that prevents you from breaking blocks, thus making it more challenging to explore the monument. Not very fun if you're claustrophobic. Your main goal is to kill the 3 Elder Guardians, and once you do so, you can freely roam the monument without any consequences. In regards to loot, there aren't just chests in every corner of the monument, though there aren't even chests to begin with, but instead you'll find 8 gold blocks in the core of the structure, which is useful for some building materials like powered rails, or making a single notch apple. There's also the chance of finding a room full of sponges, which have been in the game for a long time, but can now actually generate in the world and be obtained in survival mode. Congrats, SpongeBob, you earned it. 1.9, on the other hand, adds 2 new structures, the Igloo and End Cities. Well, it's really 3 structures if you count the End ship. Igloos at first glance seem like a lucky find for early game players that haven't even built a house yet, but there's more to it than meets the eye. Underneath one of the carpets, you'll find a trap door that leads to a secret basement where you'll find a brewing stand with the splash potion of weakness, a chest where you'll most likely get a golden apple, and all the kids I kidnapped, a villager and a zombie villager trapped behind bars. This structure basically serves as a means of teaching players that you can cure zombie villagers back into regular villagers, and as a bonus you get a brewing stand really early. But holy crap, these villagers took so long to turn back, and the only reward you got was cheap-ass trades. You saw nothing. Anyways, now on to the End City. End cities will randomly spawn in the outer islands at the end. They're basically parkour towers, so watch your step, or just build a tower up if you're not man enough. The structure is inhabited by weird box creatures called shulkers that will shoot white balls that make you, levitate. You might want to be careful here, because you could actually die. The risk is worth it though, because the loot is very rewarding. You can get some extremely OP gear from these chests. It's not even funny how overpowered this stuff is. Once you reach the end ship, you'll find something very valuable that will make the end game of Minecraft all but worth it. The dragon head. Yeah, look at me, I'm the Ender Dragon, let's go! Oh, and there's also the Elytra. Or is it Elytra? I know some people are going to be pissed at me. But anyways, it gives you the ability to fly. Unfortunately, though, it takes up the armor slot. But hey, at least you can fly, right? Alright, so which update is taking the first point? Well, in regards to terrain, 1.9 does a lot more of the outer islands at the end. Even if there isn't much to find, the patches of granite, diorite, and andesite don't really add a lot to the underground, with the exception of diorite, that is. But even if you're a builder, there aren't many options with these blocks, at least not until later updates. In regards to structures, 1.8 does pretty well with the ocean monuments, as it gives you something cool to explore in an area of Minecraft that was quite empty at the time. It offers some new resources, and what adds to the challenge is the mining fatigue, so you can't just cheat your way through. Plus, it's fully underwater, so that encourages you to use water breathing potions, unless you're built different and prefer doors. The loot, on the other hand, isn't the best. The only thing that makes the structure worth going to are the sponges, and you won't always find some. The gold blocks are a nice find, but until 1.16, it doesn't really offer that much, unless you want a notch apple, or a beacon for that matter. That being said, 1.9 gives you not one structure, but two. The end cities give you something to go after once you've defeated the Ender Dragon. The challenge it offers can be quite life-risking, especially if you're on hardcore mode, but the reward is more than worth it. It's putting on that Elytra and Dragon Head, where it really feels like you've beaten Minecraft. Not to mention there's also igloos, though it's possible you may never find one. They can be pretty useful for early game players, and they also teach you about a mechanic that could be very important. So overall, both updates give you new things to explore, but 1.9 does slightly more, so for this round, 1.9 takes the win. Now to the next category, mobs. 1.8 adds 4 new mobs, rabbits, endermites, guardians, and elder guardians. 1.9 on the other hand adds 1, the shulker. Well, I guess 1.8 wins. But hang on, quantity is not a necessity in this round. What really makes the mob special is its usage to the game. So looking at 1.8 first, rabbits are a new animal you can find in the overworld. They have a few different color variations, along with one evil variant. But they basically serve the same purpose as sheep, cows, chickens, and pigs. You kill them and they give you food. Though they can be kind of tricky to catch unless you've got sick bow shots like me. But that's not all. They have a few other drops as well. They can drop rabbit's hide, which can be used to make leather. Leather. Wow, amazing. Rabbits will also drop rabbit's foot, which can be used to make leaping potions. Isn't that exciting? Yeah, that's what I thought. Oh, and you can also make rabbit stew. Guess it's cool. Moving on from the Easter Demon, Guardians are the first hostile underwater mob. Just like that, they're already special. Overall, they give you a decent challenge when exploring the ocean monuments, but sometimes they can be kind of annoying, at least when you're out in the open. Though if you come to the ocean monument well equipped, you've got nothing to worry about. Guardians for some reason don't like squids and will kill them on sight, and they can also survive on land, but something tells me they wish they couldn't. So about that loot, that sweet, sweet loot. Guardians will drop prismarine shards and crystals, which can be useful for making those cool blocks, though you'll probably need to make a farm to do that. And they'll also drop fish, which you won't really need unless you're desperate. Now to the older brother, or should I say, elder brother. See what I did there? Elder Guardians are basically the same thing. They're just bigger, and stronger, and whiter. They serve as a mini-boss for the ocean monuments, and when you're near one of them, they'll do their spooky jump scare and force you into adventure mode. You should definitely be prepared for these guys because for some reason they have the Thorns enchantment on them, so hitting them will cause you to also take damage. In regards to drops, they'll drop sponges, which can be nice if the monument you're in doesn't have a sponge room. They'll also drop fish. Now onto the final mob, the Endermite. Endermites are basically silverfish, but purple. They don't naturally spawn anywhere, just like girlfriends. Endermites will randomly spawn when you throw an ender pearl. They're easy work to handle, but don't have any drops whatsoever. For some reason, Endermen don't like Endermites and will attack them. Well, at least they should be. Don't know why they're not. Probably just a bug in this version. So the mobs of 1.8 are for the most part kinda useful. Oh, I forgot to mention sheep also now drop food. That's nice. But anyways, let's now look at 1.9. Shulkers are the only new mob at 1.9. Just like Guardians, Shulkers are a new original hostile mob. They're the first and the only mob in Minecraft to not move at all. Though when they're weak on health, they'll sometimes teleport. What makes the Shulkers threatening are their projectiles that cause you to levitate. These things really just want to watch you suffer. Reminds me of the dentist when I was 5. But you can block the projectiles by hitting them with your sword. shooting them with a bow, or blocking them with your shield. Wait, there's shields now? In regards to drops, they drop absolutely nothing, aside from XP. And before you go to the comments, I know they drop shulker shells, which can be used to craft shulker boxes, which are extremely useful, but that wasn't added until 1.11, so it doesn't really count. Even though there aren't any other mobs, skeleton horses can now rarely spawn in the overworld, and if you find one, it will trigger a skeleton trap, but it's extremely rare, so you might never even see it. So as I said before, quantity is not a determining factor in this round. What really takes the advantage is how useful each mob is. Rabbits have pretty niche drops, and you'll probably never find yourself needing them. I mean, Rabbit's hide is almost completely useless and doesn't actually get a real use until the next 10 updates. And you'll probably never find yourself needing potions of leaping, especially since you can get the leaping effects from beacons. Guardians are a cool mob with a creative design and attack, but their drops are only useful if you're farming Prismarine. Elder Guardians are also interesting, and their special powers basically force you to have to traverse the ocean monuments without cheating. Endermites, honestly, you could go the whole game without knowing they exist, but they eventually become a necessity in Enderman farms. All that being said, the mobs of 1.8 aren't the most useful, but shulkers aren't any better. They offer an interesting challenge to the end cities, but as of 1.9, they don't drop anything, and it's not until 1.17 when you can actually farm them. All that being said, none of these mobs are bad whatsoever, but they don't add anything special to the game, at least until they're given more use in later updates. However, 1.8 does more with the mobs it adds, so for this round, 1.8 takes the victory. Now for the third category, blocks. In the last round, quantity meant nothing, but here, it means everything. Both 1.8 and 1.9 add new building blocks to give you lots of cool new options for building. There isn't much to say about a lot of these since we're really just talking about building, so let's speedrun this like Dream. 1.8 adds granite, polished granite, andesite, polished andesite, and best of all, diorite and polished diorite. Like I said before, you can find these blocks naturally generated in patches underground, and the polished variants can be crafted from their original variants. Carrying on, 1.8 adds prismarine, prismarine brick, dark prismarine, and sea lantern. These blocks make up the ocean monument, but can also be crafted from prismarine shards and crystals. 1.7 added red sand, and 1.8 adds red sandstone building blocks. Consistency. There are 5 new fence variants for the other wood types in the game, so that includes spruce, birch, jungle, acacia, and dark oak. There are also new variants of fence gates, but that's pretty obvious. I would be surprised if there weren't. But why isn't there a nether brick fence gate if we have normal nether brick fence gates? Strange. There are also new variants of doors. Wow, amazing, spectacular, I'm the ultimate Spider-Man. Wait, what? There are now banners so you can express your fascism or communism or whatever the hell you support, and you can dye them into all the colors you see on screen, unless you're colorblind. There are also now armor stands so you can flex your OP timing gear on all the peasants. I mean, noobs. Sponges have been in the game for a while, but now you have wet sponges. I'll talk more about this later. There are now slime blocks, make them using 9 slime orbs. You'll probably have a lot of these on super flat worlds. Last but not least, iron trapdoors. Cool. So those are all the new blocks in 1.8. Now let's see if 1.9 can do that cringe Twitter ratio. 1.9 adds dirt paths so you can make actual roads. Let's see how it looks in front of my epic house. Y'all must be really jealous of my talent. On the end side of things, this update adds endstone bricks. Finally. There's also chorus plants, but you'll need that for chorus fruit. You got the purple blocks, which include purple block, purple pillars, purple slabs, purple stairs, and the end rod. The glorious end rod. These blocks make up the end city, along with the endstone bricks, but you can craft them as well. You can also now craft end crystals. I'll talk about that later. There's also the dragon head, can't forget about that. Man, that was pretty interesting, wasn't it? Both these updates add a new type of element into Minecraft, alongside a new light source. Sea lanterns can work really well with a lot of structure ideas and lighting up your base, and end rods can, be used for parkour. Yeah. But anyways, some of these blocks lack variety. For example, granite, diorite, and andesite can be made into polished variants, but that's all you can really do with them. These blocks do get slabs, stairs, and walls in later updates, but since they aren't added in 1.8, they don't count. However, that's really the only complaint I can make about 1.8. 1.9 adds some cool blocks, but outside the end blocks and dirt paths, you don't have much else. 1.8 on the other hand adds tons of new blocks, giving us loads of new possibilities to work with. So yeah, the choice is pretty clear. 1.8 takes the win. Next up, we're going to be talking about gameplay mechanics. This is more of a miscellaneous category, so this can refer to a lot of things like mob and block functionality, new tools and weapons, new potions and effects, new enchantments. You get the idea. So first off, let's address the elephants in the room. Combat. Yeah, I know you guys have been dying to hear about this. So in 1.8 and every version prior, all you really had to do was spam the mouse key and annihilate everything around you. It felt good, it felt powerful. The sword was your primary weapon, but you could also use the axe if you wanted to. But let's be real, who actually did? Swords also had a neat trick where you could use it as a mini shield, but it's kinda hard to use, so don't bother unless you're a pro. That being said, Mojang believed that the combat was too overpowered, so they decided to revamp it. At 1.9, there is now a cooldown for weapons. You can still spam attack, but you're going to do a lot less damage, so really the best way to get good hits on enemies is by waiting for the cooldown to pass by, and sometimes you can even get a critical hit which does slightly more damage. There's also an attack indicator so you can see the cooldown at play, and there are two different ways to have it set. There are also some special attacks you can get from swords and axes. Swords now have an effect called Sweeping Edge, which will hit a bunch of mobs at once, and axes can disable shields temporarily, but until they add mobs that hold shields, this is pretty useless unless you're in PvP. Alright, I forgot to mention, there are shields now. Shields will block anything that comes your way. They can block off zombies and spiders, they can block off arrows shot by skeletons, and they can even block creeper explosions. Okay, now you have to love the shield or I'll come and find you. Like all other tools and gear, shields have durability, but you can also enchant them. If that's not convincing enough, you can put banners on shields as well. There's also the Elytra, which I already mentioned. It allows you to fly across your world, a nice thing to have once you've beaten the game. But don't be like Icarus and fly into the sun or whatever he did, I don't know. Elytroids also have durability, so keep that in mind. But you can repair them using leather, at least until 1.13 adds Phantom Membrane. Arrows have been expanded upon, sort of. There are now tipped arrows, which are basically potion arrows. Each tipped arrow can apply any effect, whether it be night vision, strength, weakness. Some of these you might never even use. There are also spectral arrows, which will show the borders of any mob that gets hit. This is a little more useful if it's night. 1.9 also adds an offhand. You can use this for dual wielding, or holding stuff like food, maps, or shields, while also slashing enemies or mining blocks. Either press the F key or put something in the shield slot. Now let's talk about boats, the absolute goats. At 1.8, boats were stiff and hard to control, and they broke easily, and you couldn't even get the item back. And I thought Georgie from It had it bad when he got bamboozled by that clown. 1.9 changes this, however. Boats are now much easier to control. They no longer break upon contact with any blocks. You can actually get the boat back when you break it. And as a little bonus, there are now different boat variants for each wood type. Now how about that Ender Dragon boss fight? In 1.8 in every version prior, you would hop into the end, and it would look something like this. From there you'd shoot down the pillars, land some epic bow shots on the Ender Dragon, or wait for it to come down and give you a hug. Then once you've defeated it, jump through the exit portal home and watch the boring credits. Oh, and also take the dragon egg. That's very important. So that's how it was. 1.9 does a little bit of, what's the word? Overhauling. The end's pillars are now set up in a circle around the island. Some of them are pretty short and skinny like the person watching this video. That's no longer the case. And some of the end crystals are shielded by bars. The exit portal is now fully visible throughout the fight, but like before, it will only open once the dragon is defeated. The dragon will fly around the same way it normally does, but it also has a new attack roll, Shoot Dragon's Breath, similar to fire charges, but these will create a contagious cloud wherever they land, so try to avoid it unless you want, dragon sickness, I guess? Just pretend it's funny, it makes my job easier. Sometimes the dragon will now perch around the exit portal where it will vomit the Chipotle meal it had for lunch. This gives you the opportunity to get up close and get some sword hits in, or you could try and make the Ender Dragon go to sleep with beds, but unless you're a pro Minecrafter, I wouldn't recommend this. Once you defeat the Ender Dragon, the same stuff will happen as before. But what you'll now also find is a small portal around the corner of the island. This takes you to the outer islands. But there's one more thing I should mention. The Dragon Head. No wait, that's not it. 1.9 actually gives you the ability to respawn the Ender Dragon. As I mentioned before, you can now craft End Crystals. In order to do so, you need glass, a gas tier, and an Eye of Ender. Once you have 4 End Crystals, place them down on each side of the exit portal, and from there you'll see the other crystals regenerate, and then the Ender Dragon will be back. Defeating the dragon again will open up another tiny portal, but it won't give you another dragon egg unfortunately, and you'll get less XP, which is a bummer. Next up, let's talk about effects. 1.8 adds 2 new effects. First, there's Mining Fatigue, which I've already discussed. This effect is granted to you when the Elder Guardian pulls the 5 Nights at Freddy's. It prevents you from breaking blocks unless you have an OP pickaxe, but even then it will take longer than mining obsidian, I think. The other effect is Leaping. As I've said before, this allows you to jump slightly higher. You can get it from drinking potions of leaping, or you can apply it to beacons. I would personally recommend that. 1.9 adds 4 new effects. First is Levitation, which I've already discussed. This causes you to float up in the air temporarily, and you get this effect from the White Shulker bullets. Yeah, bullets. Next, there's the Glowing effect, which is applied when you get hit by a spectral arrow. It doesn't make you glow like the Glow Squid, unfortunately. Instead, it shows the borders around anything it hits, and it's probably because of this that spectral arrows are only on Java. Then, there's the Luck effect. You get this from drinking a potion of luck, and this will make you lucky? I'm sorry, I have no idea what this does. There's also the Bad Luck effect, which makes you unlucky, I guess. Not even sure how you get it. And boom, there are your 4 effects. But a little more 1.9 side. There's now a new variant of potion you can create known as Lingering Potions. Remember the Dragon's Breath I talked about? Well, you can pick this up with a bottle, and you can combine it with any type of splash potion in a brewing stand to make Lingering Potions. These potions are basically splash potions, but the key difference is that they create a cloud of effect, similar to what the Dragon's Breath does. You'll probably never find yourself using these, but what you can also do is combine Lingering Potions with arrows to make the tipped arrows I discussed earlier, so they aren't completely useless, I guess. All this talk about gameplay is making me hungry, so let's talk about food. 1.8 adds 2 new types of meat. There's rabbit that drops from rabbits and can be cooked, but you'll probably never need it. However, rabbit can be used to make rabbit stew. Alright, now you got me hooked. There's also mutton, which will drop from sheep. This is actually pretty useful if you've got no other generic farm animals. 1.9 adds a new crop only known as beetroot. You can steal it from villagers, but you'll probably want lots of it because it doesn't really fill up your hunger very much. But it can be made into beetroot stew, which can definitely hit the spot. There's also coarse fruit, which I mentioned before. You can find it scattered all across the outer islands at the end. But what makes coarse fruit unique is that when you eat it, you'll teleport to a random spot. But be cautious, you'll turn out like my buddy Eric. Coarse fruit can also be smelted in the furnace and made into popped coarse fruit. You can't eat this. It's more of a building material. Basically like Play-Doh. It can be used to craft the purple blocks you find in the end cities. What about enchantments, you ask? Oh, you didn't ask? Well, too bad. 1.8 adds new functionality to the enchantment table. Originally, you needed XP to enchant stuff. You still do, but now you also need Lapis Lazuli. Hey, look at that! Lapis is actually useful now. Nice. There's also a new enchantment known as Depth Strider. This can be applied to helmets and allows you to move faster underwater. Oh yeah, I'm fast. Now for 1.9, there are 2 new enchantments to be found. First off, you got the most useful enchantment in the entire game, Frostwalker. Apply this to your boots and it allows you to walk on water by turning the water into ice temporarily. Basically turning you into Ice Jesus. Oh, and there's also Mending, which you can apply to anything. Basically, it takes the XP you pick up and uses it to repair whatever tools, weapons, or armor you have equipped. Pretty cool, but it's not the chat that is Frostwalker. Now for other random stuff. 1.8 gives sponges new purpose. They can be used to soak up any surrounding water, though that functionality has been in the game for a while. But now that power can be used in survival. What's different is that placing a sponge in the water will create a wet sponge. Wet sponges can't soak up water. What you'll have to do instead is put the wet sponge in the furnace in order to get the normal sponge back. And in later versions, you can just place a wet sponge in the nether to turn it back into a regular sponge because you can't place water in the nether. But that wasn't added to 1.8, so I don't even know why I'm talking about it. 1.8 grants us with the slime block. It's no ordinary building block, however. Jumping on it will allow you to bounce. Yippee! The higher you fall, the higher you'll bounce. This can be useful for parkour maps, or having a giant pit you can drop down. You can also use pistons to push the slime block up, and this will also make you bounce. Another small thing, doors are now stackable. Despite how unrealistic this is, it's very handy, you gotta admit. Also, when you craft a door, you now get 3 doors by default, more than I even need, unless I'm making the basement. You now can change the color of the beacon laser by placing any type of stained glass above the beacon, and you can also combine colors. Wowza. You can summon iron golems and withers facing any direction. I've always wanted to spawn the wither sideways. I don't know why. But what about 1.9? Well, it seems zombie villagers have a new skin. That's nice. But you know what's not nice? Enchanted golden apples are no longer craftable. Very unfortunate. But you can still find them in chests. Blaze powder is now used as fuel for brewing stands. Never even realized this was added. I thought this was always how it worked. Now let's move away from survival features for a little. 1.8 adds a new tool block known as the barrier block. This will create an invisible wall, which can be quite useful for adventure maps. You don't want to glitch in a matrix now, do you? There are also now custom world borders that you can summon in, so it can feel like you're playing the early days of Pocket Edition. Man, do I miss those days. Don't you guys? 1.8 also adds a new game mode known as Spectator Mode. This turns you into a spooky ghost and allows you to see through everything. On the surface, this is useless, but when you're underground, it's a whole new story. You can basically see any cave formation or mineshaft there is. Oh, and you can also see the perspective of other mobs. Most of them have basic eyesight, but some mobs like spiders and creepers give you an interesting perspective. 1.9 doesn't add as much, but it adds a very interesting tool block known as the structure block. To be honest, I have no idea how to use this, but basically it allows you to summon any structure in the game, or you can even create your own structures to spawn in. It can be quite handy if used properly. If any of you guys know how to use it, comment down below how. I would really like to know. Okay, that was a lot to pack in. Both these updates add and change a lot of things, but which one does it better? Well, 1.8 has a lot of interesting changes that can be quite beneficial, like cheap dropping food, doors being stackable, and adding very handy features like barrier blocks and world borders, which can be very useful for map makers. And Spectator Mode revolutionizes the way you can find stuff in worlds. That being said, 1.9 has a lot of very helpful changes as well. Boats are much easier to use now, the Ender Dragonfly is much more interesting. The offhand gives you a lot of new possibilities, and 1.9 does slightly more when it comes to enchantments. I mean, Mending becomes an absolute staple in the game, and also Frostwalker. However, what brings 1.9 down are the combat changes. They aren't necessarily bad, the way it adds more strategy is nice, but it basically discourages you from spam attacking, which was a major problem for a lot of people that have been playing the game for a long time. I mean, why else are you always seeing people say, my favorite version is 1.8.9? Not to mention, if you're going to focus more on strategy, then the axe is actually more useful than the sword, especially when you get in those critical hits. That isn't to say all the changes are bad. Shields are nice and can balance things out slightly, but you're probably going to be in a lot of cases where you wish shield combat was an option. That being said, 1.9 does more when it comes to improving the survival game, but the combat mechanics burn it down, and since 1.8 doesn't have any objectively bad changes, and in fact it adds some pretty big things like Spectator Mode, this play is going to have to go over to 1.8. Now on to the final category, overall experience. This is probably the most important category in the whole video. Basically, it's a summary of everything both updates add and change, though it's not solely about how good or bad everything is, but also how much it all actually changes the experience of the game. In 1.8, you have more variety of stone, a new structure in the oceans, new mobs, new types of meat, I don't care if you're vegan, lots of new building options, a new enchantment, a new game mode, new options for map makers, alongside other new mechanics. In 1.9, you have a new end, a new structure in the end, a new mob in the end, basically new everything in the end. Well, not really. 2 new vegetables, I mean fruit. Well, obviously coarse fruit is fruit, it's in the name. But what about beetroot? Some new building blocks, a new early game structure that educates your small brain, new combat mechanics, new Ender Dragon mechanics, new boat mechanics, 2 new enchantments, shields, new types of arrows, along with other random mechanics. With all that out of the way, let's ponder the question, which is better? Well, for all the Dora the Explorers out there, 1.8 has some new things to find in the overworld, and they do offer some cool uses, but 1.9 does more. In fact, 1.9 does a lot more. For all the History Channel fans, 1.9 adds one mob that at the time was almost useless, but 1.8 adds 4 new mobs that aren't necessarily game-breaking, but at least give you some actual use. For all the Bob the Builders out there, 1.9 gives you some cool new building options, but 1.8 gives you tons of more options. Both these updates add new mechanics and changes. 1.9 does slightly more, however, not all the changes to 1.9 left a good mark in the game, unlike 1.8. But all that being said, despite 1.8 doing more of mobs and building, and despite how controversial the combat mechanics were, 1.9 does more when it comes to features that affect the game overall. Shields are most likely crafted and used. The combat mechanics, whether you love them or hate them, change the way you try and survive. The offhand allows you to hold 2 things at once, which can have a great effect on how you manage your gear. The new boat mechanics will encourage you to actually use boats, and there is new stuff in the main progression of the game. You're probably going to explore the outer islands to the end once you defeat the Ender Dragon, and the Elliot serves as a final reward before you take your leap into the exit portal. 1.8 still adds a lot of cool things, and some of them are pretty game-changing, like sponges and survival, stackable doors, and spectator mode. But 1.9 does more for the game overall, so the final point is going to 1.9. So looking at the final results, 1.8 is the overall winner of 3 points, while 1.9 has 2. But does this mean 1.8 is a better update? Well, 1.8 succeeds in regards to mobs, building, and gameplay mechanics, while 1.9 succeeds with world generation and the overall game experience. So really, whichever update is better depends on what playstyle you're more into. That's why I divided this into the categories I did. However, from a popularity standpoint, it seems 1.8 is superior mainly because of the combat changes to 1.9, and it's because of that you have a lot of people who won't play any version past 1.8.9. It's quite interesting though. 1.8 was the end of one era of Minecraft, the Golden Age as we call it, while 1.9 was the beginning of another era, the Dark Ages, at least until 2019 when the game revived. You're probably still wondering why I chose to compare these updates. Well, I just found that both these updates are pretty similar content-wise, and I think you've probably noticed that as well after everything I've discussed. I should make it clear though that I'm not trying to shame either update. I'm not saying that 1.8 should have had more of this or 1.9 should have had more of that. This was all just fun and games, right? But anyways, that's about it. If you made it this far, congratulations. You just wasted a half hour of your life. But if you enjoy wasting hours of your short life, then consider subscribing, because I'll probably be making more videos like this, and you're at least making my life a little more worth it. Did you do it? Okay, now get out.